Hi, everybody, and welcome to our October 2021 session for EdTech Café. My name is Nick. I'm a senior instructional designer here with the Distance Learning Institute. I'm joined by my colleague, Alexa. Say hi, Alexa.
Hi, everyone. I am a multimedia instructional specialist with DLI.
Okay, so the type of session that we're going to have today is a lot more laid back, as the title might imply, EdTech. So definitely a lot more dialogue that we want to have occur. It's going to be less so us just presenting to you all. So feel free to have your mics unmuted, ask us questions if you want to riff off each other. And also, we want to use these sessions as an opportunity to stimulate connections amongst one another. All of you who might be in different programs throughout the university, if you want to bounce ideas off of each other or share your insight or any experiences that you have with creating multimedia presentations and lectures, please feel free to do so. And we're hoping that by the time that Alexa and I are done talking about the topics that we're going to cover in this slide deck, that we might be able to do a little bit of an interactive activity. So first question, by any chance, did anybody bring a PowerPoint that they would like to use for the interactive activity that we have planned for the end of this session? It's all right if nobody has one, but if you want, take the time while we're doing this, if you're listening, to maybe pick a PowerPoint that you might want to have converted into a lecture, or if just any material that you have that you would like to convert into a video lecture. So by nature, these pre-recorded video lectures are meant for asynchronous content, asynchronous learning. So when the students are not necessarily with you in a classroom, these are videos that they're going to be watching to attend a lesson without necessarily doing it at the same time or at the same place as everybody else. So we're going to be discussing a lot of these strategies and topics from the perspective of asynchronous learning. If we don't have anybody that wants to volunteer to have their PowerPoints used for the interactive activity, or if you can't find one, I'll set up some scenarios and we'll apply some of the knowledge that we're using and talking about here in this presentation. All right, Ty.
Here.
Yes. Do we have a question?
No, I would like to volunteer. If nobody has a PowerPoint, I have a PowerPoint. If you can do some demo with my PowerPoint, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, perfect.
Okay. How do I send you the PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah, it's no worries. Really, what I would like to do is ask you some questions based on the material that we're going to be covering, and then have you apply it right on the fly, and then see where you might look at your PowerPoint and say, well, based on what I learned here, I could change X, Y, Z, or add an interactivity, add an activity for students to engage with the material there. And that's really what the activity is meant for, is so that you all have the opportunity to apply what you're going to be learning here to some of your own material. And then hopefully that can set up a foundation and a kickoff point for you to continue to do so with the rest of your material. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're talking about, of course, developing effective presentations and videos. And really where I want to start is with the 12 principles of multimedia learning. If you've been to any of the DLI trainings in the past, we've talked about this before. As a matter of fact, this is where I was talking about there's a hidden presentation here. So Genially allows me to create little interactive buttons. You see that right up here on this slide. If you click on the title of this, it'll take you to an entire other presentation that I did with another colleague of ours, Hannah 5, on the 12 principles of multimedia learning. We're not going to spend a lot of time covering this specifically. We want to get more into the lecture videos, but this is definitely the place to start when it comes to creating effective multimedia content, because all of these principles are geared towards maximizing the efficiency of the way that the human brain works while it is learning in a multimedia setting. So this presentation covers a few things, including Blackboard design. But if you skip right ahead to right here, managing cognitive load, this is where the 12 multimedia principles kick in, and you'll see them related here. So these are just the 12 ones listed out. Pardon me if I cough. I'm a little bit under the weather. Everything's good, don't worry. But this list continues to grow. I mean, 10 years ago, it was like the 9 principles of multimedia learning. I'm not going to get into all of them, like I mentioned. If you click on that presentation, you'll see everything a little bit more explained. But nonetheless, these are really important to consider when making effective multimedia content, whether it's a video, a slideshow presentation, or even just an infographic or a podcast. There are a few that even if you don't decide to look at all 12 of them, which I recommend you do, there's some that, and these are the categories that these fall into. There's some that I really recommend that you pay attention to, especially, and we'll get into that in the next slide. But the reason that these principles are important is because they tackle different parts of the way that the brain processes information. And these are the 3 types of processing that occurs. I apologize when students are learning. And the categories that those 12 fall into. Gosh, I'm really sorry. I apologize. So we've got generative processing, which is just comprehending material, just taking it in at all, seeing something, hearing something, making sense of it. We've got essential processing, which is the students being able to discern what is important, what is the actual lecture material that I need to be focused on, what should I be getting out of this presentation, out of this video, out of this infographic, this slide deck, what do I need to be focused on and processing so that I can learn this material effectively. And then we have extraneous processing, which is the brain just picking up everything else that is completely irrelevant to the topic at hand and what they're supposed to be learning. Any extra colors, pictures, jokes, whatever it might be, anything that's extra and doesn't actually help them learn, actually extraneous processing. And like I said, they're covered in the other presentation that I have included here. But like I was mentioning, if you're not going to focus on all 12, at least focus on these ones. So these are the ones that I especially want to go over for this presentation. And I related them to the 3 categories that I just mentioned previously. So we've got maximizing generative processing. So that was like what I was mentioning before, just picking up information in general. So the image principle is the one that I would like to start off with. And that basically means in your videos, in your presentations, use meaningful visuals, not necessarily like the talking head as has been referred to in the past, where it's just an individual talking to a camera. It's this face the entire time. There's not necessarily any visuals or graphs or pictures or documents or anything related to the material that's being discussed. So definitely make sure that you want to include meaningful visuals in your presentations. And then the other one is the personalization principles, which I'm sure you're all very used to as instructors, which is just using a conversational tone when you're narrating or lecturing in your pre-recorded videos. So those are the 2 I wanted to focus on with the generative processing. With essential processing, this is really the meat and potatoes, in my opinion. And the 2 that I think are the big ones to focus on are definitely going to be the segmenting principle. So when we're preparing a pre-recorded lecture, as we're going to get into with preparing your scripts, we might want to plan it out like we're going to teach a class on campus. And how long are classes on campus? It can be upwards of 40 to 50 minutes, maybe even longer, an hour, 2 hours. So if you make a video for a lecture as if you're teaching 1 day's material and it's 50 minutes, that's a big, long video, especially if it's just one big, long video. You definitely want to try to segment that video out into subtopics. And the reason that we would suggest this is because, number one, it helps the students get organized so they don't have to watch a whole 50-minute video and then go back and try to figure out, well, what's that thing that my instructor said? I wanted to learn more about it, and they have to sift through the video. They don't remember if it was at the 30-minute mark or the 37-minute mark or the 50-minute mark that this is heard. If you chunk these segments out, they can kind of figure out where some of the information is based on those segments. It also helps to break up the attention span. So the multimedia principles say that after every 7 minutes of video content, student attention starts to drop off. And then that's usually where we want to either end a video so that the students can get things in chunks, or do things like an interactive activity like we're going to talk about with preparing scripts. So segmenting, very important, helps reset the attention and gets the students organized. The other one is going to be the modality principle. That one basically discusses that the spoken word is superior to the written word. Again, I really apologize. I thank you for bearing with me. But if you have a lot of on-screen text, I know we have things to consider with ADA compliance, and we have ways to adhere to that. But if you can take written word and remove it from being on-screen text and replace that with being narrated words as opposed to written words, that's going to go a lot further with maximizing the processing that the students are going to be doing with trying to learn the essential information. If you go through the Designing for Understanding presentation, it's because essentially students are taking in information in two ways, the eyes and the ears. If you can use those two things effectively, then it maximizes the processing that the brain is doing. So if they're looking at pictures, they're reading a lot of words, it's a lot of strain on the eyes. It basically maximizes the potential that the visual channel can process. So if you offload that into the audio channel, it maximizes the efficiency of the brain and the way that it can learn. So removing written words and replacing them with narrated words, of course, as far as ADA compliance will allow you to do so. And then, of course, we have minimizing extraneous processing. And this, the one that I like to start off with is the redundancy principle. And this one basically relates to the modality principle, which is attempt to avoid reading directly off your on-screen text as a narrated lecture. So what happens there is, as I was mentioning, the eyes and the ears are both processing information. When you're redundant, what tends to happen is that the eyes are seeing it, the ears are hearing it, and you'd think, well, it's double. So the brain is going to, process it double. And what winds up happening is that they compete for which channel is going to process the information, the eyes or the ears, and they sort of cancel each other out. So that's when you might want to use bullet points and then expand on them in narration, or just remove on-screen text altogether and narrate it instead, and then maybe provide a script for ADA compliance. Another thing is going to be the coherence principle, that's removing any extra things on the screen or in narration that are not related to the topic itself. If it's not going to help the students learn, then try to get rid of it. It's definitely going to maximize the essential processing while minimizing everything that's extra that the students don't need to focus on. So a rule of thumb is, if the students are picking up something that has nothing to do with instruction, that's less that they're paying attention to the instruction itself. So this is just another way to maximize the efficiency of your slide decks and your pre-recorded lecture videos. And the last one is spatial contiguity. This basically says keep on-screen images that are related to each other as close as you can together on the screen. A good example of this would be like a map and key type of scenario, where you might have a diagram and then it's labeled A, B, C, D, E, and then over off to the side is a key. If you can just label those things that are in that key directly on that diagram, that's going to minimize the amount of processing that the students have to do with scanning, as we say, where the eyes have to look at the diagram, scan over to the key, make sense of it, and then look back. So if you can keep things close together that are related to each other, it's again, it's going to maximize efficiency. I really apologize for my throat. I'm really sorry about that. I haven't felt this way all day, so I didn't think that I would feel this way coming into this presentation. But do we have any questions at this time as it relates to the multimedia principles before we talk about, I'm sure what you really want to hear is the scripts and how to prepare for your lecture videos. Anything at this time? No? Okay, so then let's move on. So I'm going to go over preparing for your lecture videos and what it is that you might want to do in order to create something that is going to be efficient, that is going to be in line with maximizing these multimedia principles to increase the efficiency of the learning process for your students in these lectures. And then Alexa is going to show you the tools that you can be using to create some of these presentations and videos for your courses. So I'm a big proponent of making yourself a script for your lecture videos, whatever that might be, whether it's typing it out word for word, whether it's just bullet points or storyboarding, deciding what you want it to look like and what are the topics that you need to cover. but definitely plan it all out as if you were going to be delivering this in person to one of your on-campus lectures. And there's two reasons why I suggest preparing as if it's going to be in person. Number one is that it's part of your regular routine. You know, you're used to it. That's normal. Planning for the next day's material is, you know, it's nothing new to you. So it's not that you have to think about it in a different frame of mind. It's going to be the same lecture. And that brings up the second point, which is we don't necessarily want to change the lecture for online. We want online to bend to the will of the instruction. So we want to deliver the exact same instruction, but within the online modality. So we want the students to get the same information that they normally would on campus, learn it the exact same way, and just use the medium of remote learning or pre-recorded lecture to deliver the same content as effectively as we would on campus. So that's why I would definitely recommend storyboarding. And what that's going to do is once you have that all spelled out, once you have it all written down, what your lecture would look like, that's when you can have a bird's eye view of it, so to say, and you can start to, you know, be efficient with it. As we were talking about with multimedia, there's efficiency is definitely a big word in multimedia content. You can kind of start to see where the essential material is since you have it all written out in front of you. And then you can kind of start to figure out where you might want to remove some material or where the extra things are that aren't necessarily important, or how you can compact all of that information in as short a segment as you possibly can. You know, again, maximizing the efficiency of the time that you have with videos. And the reason that we bring up efficiency so much is because, like we were mentioning, research consistently states that about every 7 minutes or so, students are going to, you know, their attention span just drops way off. So there's something that you're definitely going to want to do to re-engage that attention. And there's different ways to do it. Like we were talking about before, you're not going to teach your entire lecture in 7 minutes. So there's just different strategies that you can apply to maybe every 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't want to do every 7, 7 is just a number based off the research, to re-engage the student. And there's a couple things that you can do. You can segment your videos, like we were mentioning, you know, either make them into chapters within one big video so the students know where things kind of get chunked up. Or you can do things like embed an interactive activity within your lecture video every so often to re-engage the students. And an interactive activity can mean a lot of things. There are tools that we have available to us that embed with Blackboard. One of them is called Kaltura, which actually allows us to create little video quizzes. You know, you can make them for a grade, you can make them not for a grade, but they embed right there into the video. It starts asking them questions. You can write questions based off some of the things that they had just gone over in the previous segment of the video. And they can't skip it. They have to answer at least something and try. And that's one strategy that you can have to both apply the material that the students are learning. Application is really where the students learn the material, as well as resetting their attention span so they can continue throughout the rest of the lecture video as they would in class. You know, as you would pause in class for questions, for students to talk to each other, for you to expand on certain topics, engaging the student in the same way, but through the pre-recorded lecture format, whether it be through a tool, even if it's just as simple as flashing something on the screen, asking them to reflect on something, or turning it into an assignment where it's embedded within the video. There's an assignment that they have to submit for class participation, whatever. Then there's a Dropbox somewhere in Blackboard where they have to submit that. And you know that that's an assignment that they have to watch. So not only are you engaging them, but you're giving them a real reason to make sure that they watch those lecture videos, a lot of incentive. So now we're going to get into some other topics with regards to preparing a script. The next one we're going to talk about is making it timeless. So what we mean by that is you obviously want to extend the usable life of your lecture videos. And there might be certain things that would cue to students how old the lecture video is. I've been an online student, and I can tell sometimes how old the video is. If a video was recorded 5 years before I ever even got to the university, there were certain things that instructors included that made it obvious. But if it's not obvious and students don't really notice, but things like that would be referencing historical points, current events, things like that, that give away how old the video is. You might not care. Some students do notice how old the video is, and then they just think that the at times that information is being regurgitated. Some of the topics though, hey, it's timeless. No matter how old it is, it's the same information, certainly. But if that's something that you want to take into consideration, that you want to extend the usable life of your videos, making it timeless is something that's going to be really important. And the less that you have to replace and refresh your videos, the less you have to worry about how old they are. And that brings us to the next point, which is making them simple, as simple as you would like. If you want to go crazy all out, go to the one button studio and make a big video in front of a green screen. Or if it's something where you're using an Illustrator pad, whatever, just keep in mind whatever you're most comfortable with regards to how complex these videos are. Videos do age, they need some refreshing at certain points, they might even need replacing. And the more complex you make some of these videos, the less inclined you might be to want to replace, refresh, do it all over again. So those are just things to take into consideration and not necessarily critical points with planning out your videos, just something to keep in mind. If you're concerned with how long you might be able to use your videos, if students are going to notice how old they are, if that bothers you, if that bothers them, and how inclined you might be to do this video all over again, or if you want to make it better. So that's definitely going to be related to your personal preference. And then another pro tip is keep copies of your videos, whatever platform you're using, definitely keep copies. Links can go bad, servers can crash, and then they're gone. And then you might have to replace or refresh your video, make a new one. So definitely keep your own repositories of your video content. Don't use Blackboard as a repository because who knows, anything can happen to it. Like I was mentioning, links can go bad, servers can crash. So if you want to make sure that you have an insurance policy, you don't lose your videos, try to keep a copy of them any way that you can. So those are some of the things that we wanted to talk about with regards to preparing a strategy for your video lectures. Does anybody have any questions or any points that they would like to make or ask to be expanded upon further before I hand it off to Alexa and she gets into the tools?
Can I answer a question?
Sure.
Yes, Nick. Go to the fourth bullet, make it timeless. I like that very much. Can you just detail that a little bit more? How do I make it timeless? Is there any particular, more specific tricks or things I need to do to make my documents or my video or my things can have a longer shelf life?
I would say more so along the lines of things to avoid rather than things to do.
Okay.
And the reason, so when you say like things to do, you're still going to use a certain software. You're still going to maybe use a certain browser. There are certain trends that are current with the way that things are designed and the way that they look. Even when we look back to buildings, like the way that they're designed, or the way people dress, we can always look back and say, oh, that's from that time period. There's really nothing you can do about that because things progress. But perhaps maybe, although it is a big part of history, mentioning that you're recording at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because then if this is a video that you want students to use 7 years from now, then it's going to give away, hey, this is a 7-year-old video. And it might not matter that it's a 7-year-old video. It all depends on what perception you want to give the students. Some students, I've heard that they are somewhat older videos because then they feel like they're not being refreshed and that the instructor might be distant from the material. And that happens more so in courses that instructors don't really talk to the students on a regular basis, communication, office hours, things of that nature. I apologize, I'm wiping my nose. But just those are things that you can do to make it timeless if you're concerned with student perception as videos age. And then another thing to consider is maybe your own appearance. We all age. So if that's something that you want to keep in mind as well, do so. If it doesn't matter, then that's okay. But just those are tips and tricks that you can use to make your videos timeless. Is if you don't have to mention the time period that you're in, try to avoid it. And that can extend the usable life of your videos.
Thank you.
We actually have
welcome.
A comment in the chat from Hannah. She said to try avoid using dates for assignments and due dates and all of that to keep it more timeless.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thank you, Hannah. Sorry, excuse me. Hannah, if you joined us, we I don't know if you were here for that, but we also included our presentation here for Designing for Understanding. So definitely a great presentation to start off with planning out multimedia content before you ever even get to creating your lecture videos and creating a strategy for it. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to discuss, expand on, make any points?
Yes, Nicholas, if possible, I would like to add to the question. I would like to add one of the things that we do. I work for the Talent and Organizational Development Department. We are part of Human Resources, and we do orientations for new hires and different type of orientations. And when we do videos, one thing that we do is we make sure that we don't include specific data that can change with time. For example, when we do the orientation, we talk about the hospital, and at one point we were thinking of mentioning the fact that we have in Jackson more than 1,500 private beds, not private, sorry, hospital beds. And that's one thing that then we realized, no, we don't want to do that, because if we want to continue using this history video through the years, we don't want to mention numbers like that. So that's one thing. Don't mention data. Do not mention specific numbers that can change with time. That's the thing that I wanted to add.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that actually brings up another point that I would like to make as well. If you co-teach this course with another instructor, maybe perhaps not mentioning by name that instructor, because maybe that instructor might change over time, or deans or head of departments, things that can change at a moment's notice, where now it's like, oh, darn, now the video is officially outdated because 1 year later, an instructor got a new position, or you're teaching it with somebody else, and bam. And going back to simple replace and refresh, it might not be so easy to go back to that point in time in the video just to update the name of the instructor that you're co-teaching this with, or who the dean is, or what building the department might be in, or things of that nature, things that change. Exactly. So if it's something that doesn't need to be mentioned, or something that can change, that is going to go a long way with making your videos timeless and extending the usable life of your videos. Like I said, some topics, 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. So it's not like you're going to have to necessarily replace that video. But if it's something subjective, where data changes, opinions change, and you mentioned some of those things, as those things change and update, that is going to render your video outdated. And then you're going to have to consider how you're going to replace or refresh those portions of your lecture videos. And Alexa's going to talk about how you can use simple tools to make that easy for you in case you do need to do those things. Okay, so does anybody else have anything that they'd like to discuss or go further into before Alexa takes over? All right, I think we're good. I will see you when we do our interactive activity. Alexa, you're on.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about turning a PowerPoint into a video. As Nick has already mentioned with the 12 multimedia principles, how to design a PowerPoint. I will be going into simple animations and transitions so that the video will flow as you create it. We will be choosing a recording program and then recording a PowerPoint, and as always, save and review your work when you are finished. So first, I want to start off by showing you an example of a PowerPoint that I did without any animations or transitions, so that you can understand and see the difference between the two as to why you should include them. As you see, it's very direct, very choppy. It's not flowing like a normal video should. This looks more like a PowerPoint presentation that you would go through in a classroom, actually. So I'm going to show you some simple animations and transitions You don't want to use too many different types. It can be overwhelming and distracting actually to the viewer. So just choose one for all of them, and it will look nice and it will flow as the video is created. So what you're going to do is go to animations over here. Actually, transitions. We're going to start with transitions. I personally like to use fade. I would like to apply it to all of them. And then as you see, it is more flowing as if it was for a specific video. Now, transitions only affect the slide as a whole. It does not affect specific parts inside of your slide. So that's when you want to go into animations. And if you are speaking about specific things individually, maybe you want to have, say, Windows. I have at the top, I'm speaking about Windows. That one can pop up first. Then as you speak about QuickTime, that one will pop up second, and then Zoom will pop up third as you click through the arrows. So you go to animations and select fade as always. I wouldn't choose anything too distracting like the rest of them. And then it just fades in. And as you click through each of them, that is the order that they will show up as you click through your PowerPoint. If you would like them all to show up at the same time with the fade effect, you would select all of them at the same time and then select fade. So just an example, 1, 2, and 3. And then continuing, you would do the same as well for each bullet point that I would have here. Now, if you want something a little more dramatic to make an effect on a specific point that you are speaking about, here you can see that I have a cross out over this vertical photo. What I like to do is have both of the photos appear at the same time, fade them in, and then select the cross out and just make it appear as if it's very dramatic through your video. So you can see them both pop up. You would be speaking about why you should film horizontally, and then say, do not film vertically. By the way, filming horizontally is better. It is better for the alignment of the viewer's eyes. And also you usually want to film based off of your final viewing platform, which is normally horizontal. So as I go through these, I'm going to apply the animation so that you can see what an entire video will look like as you click through it. And then review. Okay. As you can see, it's a lot more smooth than everything just appearing all at one time and overwhelming the viewer with so much information at the same time. And you can speak about each point as you are talking about them. So, showing you that, I'm going to go back into here and we are going to talk about, so now that the PowerPoint is created, we're going to talk about programs to turn it into a video now. Quicktime is for our Mac users. It has the ability to do voice, screen, or video recordings of yourself. It is a great program. I highly recommend it. If you are following along on our PowerPoint, you can hover over and it shows you the step-by-step instructions on how exactly to use the program to record a screen recording. Zoom is used for Mac or Windows. And the same for, if you hover over the logo, you will see the presentation recording for Zoom. I wouldn't necessarily call it a screen recording because you're not recording your entire screen. You would just be recording whatever is on your Zoom at that moment. And speaking of that, I have a recording showing you what it would look like if you do record through Zoom. Now we'll record through Zoom, select the Zoom app, new meeting, join with computer audio, start your video, select more, record on this computer. Recording in progress. Select share screen, advanced, slides as virtual background. Select which slides you would like to share. Open to a full screen and hide your mouse in the upper right-hand corner. When you're ready to click through your slides, click the left or the right arrow on your keyboard. When you're finished, go down to the bottom where it says end and select end meeting for all. Your video will automatically be saved to the computer as an MP4. So I'm actually going to pause right here so that you can take notice that it does save an audio if you want only a voice recording, and then it will go and show you a video recording. Here is your video. Open it up so that you are able to trim the video where you want to trim it. Go over to edit, select trim, and then slide this yellow portion to where you want your video to start. Select trim, and then press play and rewatch your work. When you're ready to click through your slides, click the left or the right arrow on your keyboard. If you are satisfied with your video, select to close the tab. Name your video what you would like to name it. Then select where you want your video to be saved at. The desktop is always the best place. When you close everything, your video is saved on your desktop. Now, the only downfall after I already went through animations and transitions for Zoom specifically is that it will not apply those animations and transitions. So everything will be a little more choppy. But the plus is that you're in the bottom right-hand corner and your students can watch you kind of lecture at the same time as you're going through each slide. Going through voice recordings, I have just a few suggestions on what you should do. Always record in a quiet space. An example, which is not necessarily ideal for people, but is inside of a closet because it is very quiet. There's not usually sound inside of there. Always use a script, as Nick has went over before. It helps you avoid saying anything that's unnecessary that can be distracting to your viewers as they're watching the video. And then always replay and listen closely for extra noise in the background. If you can hear the air conditioner or the refrigerator or dogs barking or anything, that noise will be in your video if it is around you. So just be cautious of your surroundings. And now we are going to go through the hands-on section. See, we have a few chats. Yes, we will be sending out this. I included the presentation link in the chat, everybody, if you would like to copy that. Otherwise, we will be sending out the recording of this session via email to everybody as well.
All right, so before we get into the interactive activity, thank you, Alexa. I want to point out a few things that Alexa really, that she brought up that are actually really helpful with regards to some of the things we were talking about before with the multimedia principles. So that trim function in Zoom is really awesome if you want to segment your videos, if you just want to make it one big long hour and then kind of use that trim function to create different segments. That's a function that you can use right there. You can also convert narrated PowerPoints directly into a video. There is a feature within PowerPoint that allows you to just convert a PowerPoint that you have narrated with all these animations timed out into a video. It'll make it an MP4 and it'll look exactly as if it was a video from the very beginning. So that allows you the comfort of having something really familiar like PowerPoint, if you've used it frequently, to take your time, plan it out as you would like to, and have your transitions, have your topics spread out from slide to slide, and use it times out when you stop talking to know when to go to the next slide. It's really cool, and it looks like it was all on purpose from the very beginning. So if you use the narrated feature in PowerPoint, and then you decide you want to convert it into a video, it can do so, and it's pretty awesome. Another thing that Alexa also pointed out was things that are actually really in line with the multimedia principles, like signaling was a principle that we didn't necessarily cover here, but is included in the presentation that is included within this one. You know, letting your students know, hey, I'm talking about this, right? The circle to slash. Don't do this right at the moment that it's being narrated. You know, that's part of the signaling principles in that list of multimedia principles. I can't say enough how much I recommend going through those multimedia principles in order to create effective multimedia content before you decide that you want to make it into a lecture video. It's a great place to start. It's a great place to give yourself the opportunity to get it right the first time. So before we subject Ty to the interactive activity, is there any questions, anything that anybody would like to bring up or expand upon further?
I have a question if you have a second.
Sure.
You started with Genially for your presentation, and that you can record on that as well. And it also requires like kind of constant interaction. Have you used that do you recommend that for lecturing or the equivalent online?
Lecturing, Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that Genially is not completely ADA compliant. So if that's of a concern, then take that into consideration. Maybe there's some avenues where you can use Genially, and then at the same time use different methods to be ADA compliant while using Genially. But otherwise, it is a really good tool. I really enjoy using it. I like the interactive stuff. You see us hovering over things and little bubbles pop up, extra presentations, directions on how to use the tools like Alexa pointed out. And it's really easy to design in it. But Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong about ADA compliance.
Yeah, I think Genially is a fantastic tool to use. It kind of depends on what you're doing with it. So if you're doing like a live session that's synchronous, like we are here, that I use Genially for almost all of the trainings that I put on, because I like that ability to kind of click on it and then email it out later so that people can get that extra information. So what Nick's talking about with the ADA compliance is if you were to, let's say, create a Genially presentation and then embed just the presentation into Blackboard, that's where you kind of hit those issues, because they haven't met full ADA compliance because of some of those clickable things. So whenever you're like recording a video or doing a synchronous presentation where you're clicking on the items and describing it, then you're totally good to use Genially. But if you're trying to create something that then like the students can just read themselves, that's when you maybe would want to do like a PowerPoint or a PDF or something instead.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Hannah. So yeah, she kind of mentioned the similar idea, which is you can use Genially, but if you're concerned with the ADA compliance, there are other methods that you can do in conjunction with your Genialys in order to meet that compliance. And it's usually going to be things like alternative text, right, Hannah? Scripts. One of the video tools that we use to embed videos into Blackboard Culture auto generates captions. So if you're narrating, it'll generate captions. You can also type them in manually or have an instructional designer do so for you, or include your own script so that you can meet ADA compliance with your lecture videos. Because like we were talking about before, with removing on-screen text, that might generate some concern with ADA compliance. But with the inclusion of captions and with scripts that can be downloaded and read, that's where you can use those things conjunctively to meet ADA. I really apologize for my scratchy throat. I'm so sorry. I haven't felt like this the whole day. I didn't anticipate this.
You're okay, Nick.
Thanks. Okay, so anything else that anybody wants to cover before we get to the interactive activity? So let me describe what our intention was. If you decide even now that you want to open up one of your PowerPoints and assess your own instruction that you might have created already in the past, you want to apply some of these things towards in order to create an effective lecture video. We wanted to give you all the opportunity to apply some of these things so you can kind of assess to yourselves live, what would I do to something that I've already created to apply some of these things that we're talking about here, and maybe even get live feedback from us or from your peers. So one of the first things that I wanted to do is just taking a look at these principles that we actually went over. Obviously, there's a bigger list. But if there's anything in any of your PowerPoints or pre-recorded lectures or any multimedia content that you have where you might think, I can apply one or some of these principles in order to maximize the efficiency of that presentation. I'll give you all a minute, and then if anybody wants to share, please feel free to do so. Even if you don't have anything necessarily that you're looking at yourself, just even picture the idea of a student going through a lecture video, and there's just a ton of on-screen visuals, text, a lot of narration, a lot of deep, heavy descriptions of things, big vocabulary that's both spoken and written. There's images everywhere. There's big paragraphs on screen. And the student is wondering, should I be listening? Should I be reading? What's important? What's not? Why there's so many words? It's really hard for me to digest all of this. Are there any principles that you might see right here on your screen that you might be able to apply to a situation like that in order to assist the learner with maximizing the efficiency of learning in the multimedia presentation? Any ideas?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, so I love your presentation. I thank you for both of you showing us lots of insights. And I think making all these animations, I think it will be very good. I think currently my PowerPoint, I don't have any animations. I used to have some, but for whatever reason, I don't have them anymore. But I like the fading. I like the flying in and all that. That's all very good. One thing that I think it bothers me a little bit is when I want to go back to the previous slide, and then I need to reverse all these animations. That is something I personally think can be annoying and time consuming, because I have lots of students, right? I have 50 students in the classroom. There are oftentimes I need to go back to the previous slide because they do ask a question on the previous slide. And then I need to reverse all these animations. That is one thing that bothers me. I don't know whether you have a suggestion for that. Number one. Number two is, sure. I would like to add, I think too much or too little, they're both bad. And one thing I like to add, I think is very useful for me at least, is color. Is color. I think the red, I went to a marketing seminar. There actually research has been done showing how the color red is making a big difference in the marketing effects. So after that very convincing marketing research paper or presentation, I started to change my PowerPoint presentations using different colors, but most important things I highlight in red I also do that in the instructions in my exams, like, show your work, and all these things that I put in red. I think that will catch students' attention. But if you can address the animation in terms of, when I reverse a slide and all that, what is the best way to do it?
Sure. So I'll start with your second point. That is definitely an effective method of designing in your presentations. As I was mentioning, that's part of the signaling principle. Maybe everybody's talking about signaling. Maybe I should have included it as part of Nick's picks. But yeah, using red effectively to highlight certain things, pointing out to students, look at this now, this is important, goes a long way in pointing out to the students, this is what you need to focus on right now. Very much reduces extraneous processing, because now they're no longer focused on any other part of the screen. They're just looking at there. Boom, what's in red. And like you're saying, too much, too little. Definitely don't want to signal too much, because then it it loses its effectiveness. And with your first point, with going backwards in the animation, so definitely what we're talking about here is far more related to asynchronous material. So not necessarily while you're presenting to the students live, where they would be asking you a question, asking you to go back. In this case, they would just rewind. But if you do want a suggestion for that, having to go back and explain something, if you know that there's a slide where the students are going to ask you to go back, make a copy of it and make it the next slide. Okay. And then you don't have to actually go backwards, and you don't have to undo all the animations. You could just go forward, and it looks like you're going back. Remove the animations in the copy, and then it's just boom. You just go forward, one click, you're forward, and it's like back to where you were without having to go back. So you just make a copy, and then you're at your static slide, which is the same as just going back, but now you're going forward.
Suggestion on that as well. If you don't want to have an extra slide, maybe use only the transitions instead of the animations. The transition changes the entire slide as a whole. It doesn't affect every part of your slide, every single word that you have on there. So it's just as a whole, it's only one little, fade in. It's not a bunch of multiple different things changing at the same time over and over again every time you want to go back and forth and teach. So that's my suggestion. Use only simple transitions, and the same one pretty much for every single slide, because you don't want them to be too different. It's very distracting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alexa. It's actually part of, if you're still looking at my screen here, in minimizing extraneous processing, spatial contiguity. We talked about space. What Alexa kind of mentioned there with the transitions, not to have too much variation, is using space effectively. If you go from slide to slide to slide, it's okay to just use a template and keep information in the same place, because then students know where to look for every slide for the information. They don't have to go to the next slide and say, okay, where is it now? It's because it's a different design. Obviously, of course, they're fun and they can spruce things up. It's definitely an art form, knowing where to add some of these extra things into your presentation. But definitely what these principles do is highlight the essential material, so that above all, the students are learning in your presentations. That's really what these principles are geared towards, is making sure that the content that you're trying to teach them is the star of the show, not necessarily the design of it or any tech tools that you're using, but the material itself, how they're going to learn it and how they're going to apply it, which is why we talked about things like segmenting and engaging your students within your lecture videos.
Thank you.
So how about that? That's the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Can anybody think of something that they're already working on, a PowerPoint that they already have, whatever your topic is, your subject matter expertise, whatever you're teaching, and think of a way that in one of your PowerPoint slide decks, videos that you might have already designed or teach on a regular basis, where you can decide, you know what, here's a good place to stop and make them engage in the material they just went over. Can any of you think of a spot where you can do that right now in any of your content, and how might you go about doing so? No idea is too crazy. We can make it work online, but I just want to get you all thinking about, how can I engage my students while I'm not actually with them? Let's see, anybody?
Yes.
All right.
What I could mention is that in orientation sessions that we do, obviously they're not lectures, we ask them to do polls. So they interact with the polls that are available in Zoom. We also have a moment where we ask them, okay, how do you feel about the information that we already share with you? So we make a stop before continuing. Two things that come to mind right now are
Very nice. Very good points. Yes, a poll. Even if you're doing this asynchronously where the students aren't all together, maybe at the conclusion of the week, you share the poll results. How did everybody feel about the poll that was asked in the middle of the video? Maybe make that a requirement, for points. If they don't do the poll, they didn't watch the video. So what are they doing while they are asynchronous and away from you and online and remote? Or even things like a survey, so that you can get feedback on your own presentation and how you can actually help the students in the future in making this an even better presentation, how you can engage the students more, or maybe it was too engaging, maybe there were too many words, maybe they want to do more interactive activities, but you can get some of those things back in a survey through engagement of your students in your lecture videos. Remember, there's definitely two benefits to doing that in the middle of your lecture videos. You're both engaging the students and resetting their attention span, while also having them apply the material while they're learning it. And that's really where learning takes place, is application of the material, not so much just a static viewing of the information. We are right at 2 o'clock, so I understand if anybody has to go. Alexa, was there anything that you wanted to do as an interactive activity before those who need to go start to exit?
Yeah, so, well, for anybody that had a PowerPoint, just kind of be aware of your animations and transitions when you want to turn them into a video. If you want to apply any right now, see what works, what looks nice, what is quick for you, Ty, if you are lecturing. When you have to go back and forth, just see what is the easiest, I guess, to view as a viewer. Pretend that you are the student having to watch it yourself.
That's a good point, Alexa. Definitely want to get the student's perspective. Is this something you would want to watch as a student? Something that you would want to do? Is it would help you if you were learning this material? Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Anything they'd like to expand upon or share?
Hey, this is Michelle. I've got a really quick question. You had mentioned there was another presentation that you had referenced a couple of times. Do we have access to that one as well? Or is that a separate class we need to register for?
No, it's actually a previous training. Am I still sharing my screen? What do you see now?
Yeah, we see the maximized generative processing.
Perfect. Okay, so this is it. This is that presentation I'm referencing. I'm going to go back to this one. This is the one that we're sending out to you. I included it here. It's right here, and it's the title. So if you click that, it'll open it up here.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yep. And this is something that Hannah and I did together a few months ago. And if you want, we can also send you the recorded videos for that, because just as you might assume with some of the things we talked about, we narrated a lot. We go much deeper into the topics than the on-screen text would lead you to believe. Keeping in line with some of the principles that we talked about, narrating a lot helps. So if you want the recorded videos for any of those trainings, we can provide that to you as well. Feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, I would love to get those. Thank you.
That's great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So yeah, again, can't preach the multimedia principles enough. Great place to start so that you can set off on the right foot forward when beginning to plan out your lecture videos. So definitely keeping in mind these principles of multimedia learning, this will at least maximize the efficiency of the learning. And then planning out your script is going to maximize the efficiency of your time and your delivery method for that which you are trying to teach to your students. The idea here is definitely to give the students the best experience that they can, try to mimic the classroom as much as possible through the online format. Like we like to point out, we don't want you to have to change your lectures and your topics and the way you would deliver instruction because it's remote. we want remote to bend to your will. So planning these things out definitely gives you an idea of what you want to do. And then from there, we can figure out how it can best be delivered in the remote format, so that way we're staying consistent with your normal routine. You're teaching class just exactly as you would like to, and the students are getting just as much out of it as they would if they were in the classroom, at least as much as possible. If any of you don't have anything else for us, then we'll conclude. But feel free to reach out to any of us at the Distance Learning Institute if you have any questions. We hope this was helpful. If you'd like to provide any direct feedback or topics that you want us to cover in the future, please let us know. We'll be happy to do so. And for those of you who want a copy of this presentation, we'll be sending it out later to all the participants. And if you want any of the pre-recorded trainings that Hannah and I did on designing for understanding and the multimedia principles, please let us know. We'll be happy to send that to you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Well, thank
day.
you all for coming.
Thank you.
Hope
Have
you
a
enjoy
great
the
day.
rest of your week and stay safe.